Note 6a, the passive voice. Objective 1a, to list the three parts of passive voice in English. Objective 2a, to list the two parts of passive voice in Latin. Objective 1b, to quickly convert active to passive voice in English. Objective 2b, to quickly convert active to passive voice in Latin. Short term, you'll know the B objectives if you can do the exercises. And all of this stuff will be helpful for helping you greatly handle passive voice in both languages. You might want to take notes, especially since many technical terms that you will run into later in your career in Latin will appear here. First off, some background information. There are 5 aspects of a verb: person, number, mood, tense, and voice. In this section, we're just going to deal with voice. There are 2 kinds of voice: active voice and passive voice. Just for your information, the possibilities for person are first, second, and third. For number are singular and plural. For mood are indicative and imperative. Later on, we will get a third mood called subjunctive, but for now we just have indicative, which is your normal verb indicating what happened, and imperative for command forms. And tense is obviously past, present, future, although those 3 simple tenses are often subdivided into many particular tenses. Objective 1a, to be able to list the 3, really just 2 requirements for passive voice in English. There are really just 2 because the third requirement is optional, as you see down here. The things you need are a form of the verb to be, am, is, are, was, have been, will be, a participle. Now, a participle is an adjective with verbal content inside of it. So, like running. You know it's an adjective because you can say, I am an adjective, I am running. But it has verbal content inside of it. It has this idea of motion, activity. Other participles are passive, like begun, shrunk, thrown. And then lastly, you need an optional agent introduced by the word by me, by Hannah. That tells who the agent of the action really was. Why don't you try some exercises? Let's mark these 3 parts of passive voice in English. So, exercises 1a. If you forgot what I just said to you, it's here in the rule is here in the black box. So please number the parts of passive voice 1, 2, or 3. When you find the form of the verb to be, mark a 1. When you find the participle, mark a 2. And when you find the agent introduced by, mark a 3. I did number 1 for you. You try 2 through 5. Stop the video, and in a second I will put up the answers. Here they are. Notice in section 5, there was no agent introduced by. That's because this is a true, highly passive sentence where they are hiding from you by whom it was done. All they say is, it was blanked. By whom? By what? It doesn't say. So you just leave it off. There is no 3. I remember I told you that 3 was optional. Now that you know these 3 parts of passive voice, objective 1b, to quickly convert active to passive voice in English. Here I have an example of 2 sentences, and in active voice, a true subject acts upon a true object. For example, the girl, subject, picks up the rake, object. The car, subject, smashed into the gas station, which is your object. In passive voice, it's reversed. You can see I have this yellow and red X here. So in passive voice, the true object, like rake or gas station, is now what's going to get talked about and is going to become our subject. So it's going to go to the start of the sentence. So in passive voice, the reverse is true. The true object, which is now your subject, is acted upon by, and you will see that word by all throughout passive voice, is acted upon by what should be the true subject. but it's no longer the subject. Really now it's buried inside of a prepositional phrase. So for instance, the girl is the true subject, but in the passive sentence, girl is buried inside the prepositional phrase by the girl. Car was your subject. Car is inside the prepositional phrase by the car. All right, so let's get some simple steps so that you can convert active to passive voice quickly. First off, swap the nouns in the subject and predicate. Just flip them. Whatever noun was first, make it second. Whatever noun was second, make it first. Second, add by to the new predicate. So the car was first, it became second, put by in front of it. And then last off, replace the verb. The verb was active before, like picks up, smashed into. Make it passive. And you say, well, Mr. Rudman, how do I make it passive? Well, you replace it with the same tense of the verb to be
plus a past participle.
So for instance, picks up is present tense, so you would replace it with is, which is also present tense.
And picked up, which is the participle.
Or smashed is past tense, so you would replace it with was, which is also past tense.
And smashed, which is the participle.
So you replace it with the same tense of the verb to be, and then get the verb's content
into a passive
past participle. So, for instance, I ate the hamburger. Ate is past tense, would become was eaten.
So altogether, the hamburger was eaten by me.
A will run becomes will be run. So it's pretty simple. You just use that same tense of be and then use the participle, blanked. All right, let's try that. If you forgot those three rules, well, they're still in the box. Make these sentences passive. Number one, I ate the car. I'll do the first one for you. The car was eaten by me. You tried 2 through 4. Stop the video, and in a second I'll put up the answers. Okay, and the answers are here. In number 3 here, the verb was passes by. So that by doesn't count as your normal by that you use for the new predicate. So in this number 3, you actually have 2 bys. The first one is a direction, the second one is a cause. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Now, since we're good at doing passive voice in English, let's try some
Latin.
First off, let's go over the parts of passive voice in
Latin.
Here in stage 6, it's really simple. The only forms you need to know are ter and inter. These obviously replace t and nt. So, he, she, it is blanked, they are blanked, is how you would translate those. So first off, you need one of these two forms. Later on, there will be many other ways to make passive voice, and it will get much more complex, but for now, it's really simple. And then the second thing you need, which is optional, is an agent in the ablative case introduced by ab. So, puella. Notice that puella is an ablative. Caro. Notice that caro is ablative. So, if I ever ask you, what's the function of caro? Well, what's its case? You would say, well, it's ablative case. But what's its function is
Personal
agent. It's telling who the agent is. Agent, by the way, means the doer. Who is the doer? The true doer. Okay, let's get good at identifying these two parts of passive voice. So we'll go down and do some exercises. If you forgot the two parts, they're in the box there. I've done number 1 for you. I marked the passive verb with a 1 because that was the first requirement.
and
I marked the ablative of
personal
agent with a 2 because that's the second requirement. Why don't you try 2 through 4, stop the video, and I will put up the answers. Okay, so the answers were here. I don't know why these are numbered. I guess somebody was drunk the way they are, or my computer was drunk. Notice in number 3 down here that it doesn't tell whom the friends are saluted by. It just says the friends soon are saluted. So yeah, you don't always need an ob because that ob is optional. In fact, that's a really passive sentence. They don't even tell you who did it. Okay, and now let's go on to objective 2b and get good at converting active to passive voice in
Latin.
All right, these will be very similar to the English rules. First off, notice that the colors flip-flop. First it was red, then yellow. In the passive sentence, it changes to yellow, then red. So your 3 rules are up here. First off, accusatives, like Juliam, become nominatives, like Julia. So what used to be the object is now the subject. It's now the focus of the sentence. It's now what that sentence is talking about. Second, nominatives become ablatives of personal agent, preceded by ob. So Vespasian
Vespasianus
becomes ablative.
by Vespasian. Ab Vespasiano.
And then last, the verb ending is changed from its active to its passive form. Basically, all you add is
A trill sound created by the letters UR. So tur or untur. And if you can't trill it, just say tur or unter. But beware.
I will use the example here in the 3rd line. Parent was active. Over here in the passive, you might think it would be parentur. Haha, but it's not. Why? Because the verb always has to agree with the subject. And in the first one, the subject was plural, so you got a plural verb, unt. But when you flip-flop girls and mom, your new subject over here is singular. So you need the singular form, even though
it was plural before.
So don't just mindlessly add UR.
Because the subject might have changed in some way.
The girls obey their mother. Mother by the girls is obeyed. The men, their sons command. The sons by the men are commanded.
If you just have a little image video of what's going on in your mind, then you don't even have to think about all these rules. That would be the best way to do this.
Vespasian greets the Romans by Vespasian are greeted. Marcus, Julia punches. Julia by Marcus is punched. All right, hopefully that was simple. If you forgot your rules, they will be in the box here. So please make these sentences passive. Stop the video, and in a second I will put up those answers. Okay, and the answers. Number 1, the army calls the queen. The queen is called by the army. The boy carries the stick by the boy is carried. Father, a good servant loves, a good servant by father is loved. Number 4, and the ugly big man pleases the pretty girl. The pretty girl by an ugly big man is pleased. Notice that all those were ablative, and all those were nominative. All right. So hopefully you feel comfortable now in identifying the parts of passive voice and switching between passive and active in either language. Let's review our objectives, and hopefully you got them. 1A, to list the 3 parts of English passive voice. If you forgot, well, they were right there. Form of the verb to be, a participle, and an agent, optional agent, by. Number 2A, to list the 2 parts of Latin passive voice. Well, if you forgot them, they were right here. They were tur or inter and ob. Objective 1B, to quickly convert active to passive voice in English, you swap, add by, and replace the verb with the same tense of be plus its past participle. And lastly, objective 2b, to quickly convert active to passive voice in Latin. Okay, make the accusative your new nominative subject. Make the nominative into an ablative of agent introduced by, and use a passive verb. To finish, I would like to talk briefly about why people use passive voice.
Or
why might you want to use passive voice in your writing? First reason is to talk impersonally. Mistakes were made, duties were neglected, and lives were lost. Notice that it doesn't say
because really they're hiding it from you.
who made the mistakes, who neglected their duties, and who lost people's lives.
Who's the guilty one? It doesn't say.
So using passive voice enables people to talk impersonally,
To not attribute agency, causality, or guilt, and thus
to distance themselves from what happened. It's a very good professional practice to use passive voice. Not in your writing usually, but just in your talking. And then the other reason that you might want to use passive voice is to shift attention from the true subject to the true object. It was touched by me, where the focus of that is on the it, not on me, the toucher. And that often happens in like poetry, that they want to start a sentence kind of backwards. And passive voice is that kind of backward way of speaking, where you start with the object rather than the subject. Well, I hope you feel confident with passive voice and are ready to take on Chapter 6.